we know that specifically Texas added 4 million people. Of those 4 million people, do you want to take a guess at how many were Anglos? Just a guess.
I'd say a majority.
180,000. That's it, of 4 million. 95% of the people that were added, and we know that when it comes to minority populations, they tend to be undercounted. So get this, we added 4 million people. They were people of color. Texas got 2 new seats. So they took those black and brown and Asian bodies, and guess what? Do you think that we got a new black, brown, or Asian seat? Somehow, the way that they do their Republican math in the state of Texas, that amounted to 2 new white seats. Guess what? White Republican seats. We got 2 new Republican seats.
All right, y'all. So today we're talking about this Census Bureau hearing that went down in Congress. Now, I know that might sound boring at first, like who really thinks about the census, right? But this stuff actually matters, especially for Black and brown communities. It's about funding, representation, where resources go, all of that. I want to start by showing y'all a part that really stood out to me. This is Representative Maxwell Frost. He's young, he's bold, and he keeps it real. He's speaking up about how the census affects real people and not just numbers on a paper. Let's check out what he had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to say, like many hearings we have on this committee, it was started with a lot of falsehoods. We heard, and I don't know if you misspoke, Mr. Chair, you had brought up that states like Florida and Texas did not gain seats. When they did gain seats, my state gained a congressional seat. I think these facts are really important as people are asserting that there's some sort of grand conspiracy here with the Census Bureau. The other thing I want to do is thank you for coming to Central Florida. You met with my staff and community leaders in Orlando, and really appreciate you doing that. My Republican colleagues have called this hearing out of concern about errors resulting in some overcounting in the 2020 census. However, Florida had one of the most harmful undercounts in the country when we talk about Black and brown folks specifically. Director Santos, Florida had a roughly 3.5% undercount. Can you put that into terms of how many households were impacted?
One more time?
We had a 3.5% undercount. Can you put that in terms of how many households were undercounted?
I actually can't without some mechanical help. Sorry.
There is something that was going on in 2020 that might have made the counting uniquely challenging. What was that?
There were actually some, I believe, natural disasters.
Yes, natural disasters, and there was another big thing going on.
The
global pandemic.
Yeah.
COVID-19. I know, I want to forget about it. COVID-19 was going on. But not just that, but Florida, and in part because of the climate crisis, has had increasing extreme weather events across the entire state, hurricanes included. So we have hurricanes, wildfires, a public health crisis, and political interference in what was going on as well. And by political interference, I'm talking about situations where special interest groups are pressuring officials to change questions on the census or end outreach prematurely. For Black and brown communities being underrepresented in the census, especially in Florida, it's nothing new. It's been going on for a long time. In fact, the House version of the budget for the census blocks the Census Bureau from reaching out to anyone more than twice, which is funny because some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who would agree with blocking you all from reaching out to people more than twice, I bet some of their constituents would like that limit when they're campaigning as well. Director Santos, if Black and brown communities are regularly undercounted, this means that resources are directed away from these communities. We know this worsens the problems of affordable housing, transportation. What other problems does an expander create?
What other problems?
Yeah.
Does what?
Undercounting of
undercounting. Yes. Not only are there impacts with regard to federal funds allocations, but we don't get as accurate a picture of the communities as we should, and that can impact everything from economic development, a manufacturer coming in to see if they have a sufficient labor base. Well, if there's undercounts, there may not be sufficient adults or whatever, to community needs assessments, to infrastructure assessments, whether to put in new roads, new bridges, things of that sort.
Yeah.
So there are an expansive, in business communities also, whether to put in retail shops.
So it really impacts everything.
It impacts all of society.
I think that's right. And this harm, which goes back far longer than a decade, is being made worse, especially in my state, by our governor, Ron DeSantis, who went out of his way to veto the Republican-made political maps in Florida and demanded that his racist version of the map, which Florida appeals court confirmed was racist, be accepted. So I just think it's interesting to me that some of my colleagues want to assert that you're part of some grand conspiracy to undercount Republicans when my Republican-run state of Florida received an extra congressional seat. Why? Because of the fastest-growing demographic in the state of Florida, people of color, then use that opportunity of the new seat to actually gerrymander it and get rid of 2 black access seats in the state of Florida. We've got to do a lot better, especially as it relates to these counting errors. Just really quick with the last bit of my time. As I see it, the 2030 census needs to have contingency plans for major disasters, political interference, and reaching undercounted communities. Can you talk a little bit about efforts you've been making to focus on those things, especially natural disasters?
Yeah, certainly we do. We are absolutely leveraging as many of our administrative records from different data sources to help out clarify and improve the counts, not only in disaster zones, but in other areas. And so we're doing that type of work. We're also in our upcoming 2026 test, we will be visiting areas that were subject to some severe natural disaster areas like parts of North Carolina.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Up next, we have Representative Nancy Mace. Now, I'ma be real. She comes at things from a totally different angle than I do. She's a Republican, and sometimes her points just don't sit right with me, especially when it feels like folks are downplaying real issues our communities face. But I want y'all to hear her for yourselves. Let's check out what she had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Santos, for being here with us today. The U.S. Census Bureau carries out the important constitutional duty of conducting the decennial census as required in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, as you very well know. The census has far-ranging consequences, determining the apportionment of congressional seats, electoral college votes states receive, and the flow of hundreds of billions of dollars in federal funding to states and localities. The Census Bureau's post-enumeration survey for the 2020 census identified serious over and under counting issues, which the Bureau has acknowledged are worse than previous censuses. Even more troubling, the Census Bureau's report acknowledges a statistically significant overcount in liberal Northeast states and a statistically significant undercount in conservative Southern states. The 1790 Census Act, which the left likes to use as an excuse to count illegals and residents and whatever the heck you want to call people in this country who aren't citizens, that women were counted, but they couldn't vote. No, they couldn't vote, but women were citizens of the United States. So the left, that's their reasoning for counting illegals in the census and that sort of thing. So I have a series of questions for you, Mr. Santos, that are yes or no. And so I would ask that you use yes or no when I ask these questions. Did the U.S. Census Bureau do anything to identify the immigration or citizenship status of individuals surveyed during the 2020 census, yes or no?
No.
Are illegals counted in the census, yes or no?
Yes, if they're permanent residents, if they reside in the U.S.
Okay, so when you're doing the census with folks and asking the question, you're asking them if you're not asking if they're a citizen. You're asking, do you ask if they're a permanent resident?
We ask folks to list everyone who lives at that residence.
Okay, but you're saying you're only counting illegals if they're a permanent resident.
Well, if they live at that residence. It's the interpretation of the instructions.
So your definition of permanent residence is that they live at a place in the U.S., at a U.S. address.
Yes, I believe I misspoke because there's a legal definition to permanent. Yeah, to permanent
Okay.
resident. It's someone who usually lives at that address.
So I'm going to ask the question again. Are illegal aliens, criminal illegal aliens, the people that break the law coming into our country when they enter in the door illegally, are they counted in the U.S. Census, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Are there political implications for congressional apportionment and the Electoral College when we're counting non-citizens, when we're counting illegals, criminal illegal aliens in the census, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Are there political implications for congressional apportionment in the Electoral College when you are counting criminal illegal aliens in the U.S. Census?
I do not know.
Oh, you absolutely know. Because apportionment is based on what? Is it based on what? Population?
Yes.
Population based on counts in the what? U.S. Census?
Correct.
Right. You're the director of the U.S. Census Bureau, correct?
Correct.
Why is this so difficult for you to answer honestly?
Well, no, it is what it is. So
What
if there's
is
more
what it is?
population,
What is
then
what it
you get.
is? You just said you didn't know if there were political implications for congressional apportionment in the Electoral College when you're counting illegals.
In all honesty, I am not a politician. I'm a scientist, and so we do our counts according to
Okay,
the
Mr.
Constitution.
Science,
and-
Mr. Science.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
When you're doing apportionment, we're doing congressional seats based on population that includes illegal aliens. Does that have a political impact in campaigns when you're drawing those lines and having people vote in those elections?
They are counted in apportionment. Yes.
Okay. You're not being honest this morning, and I think it's a slap in the face to the American people. If apportionment of congressional seats is based on the census and roughly 750,000 people per congressional seat in this country, would that unfairly impact how congressional seats are drawn, yes or no?
I'm sorry, you're speaking too fast for me. Can you slow down a little bit?
No, I can't. The answer is yes. In California, in Valadeo's district, where 750,000 people live in that district, 167,000 people voted in that election. I would imagine, and number one, Gavin Newsom's probably still counting because the guy can't do math 3 weeks, 4 weeks into post an election. But 167,000 people out of 750,000 population. In my district, 390,000 people voted. We don't have the number of illegals that California has statistically, scientifically, Mr. Science. That's just the math. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Now listen, up next we have Representative Jasmine Crockett. And if you've seen her before, then you already know. She doesn't play. She always comes through with that real talk and stays checking folks when they get off track. She's one of the few up there really reminding people what these hearings are supposed to be about. The truth, the facts, and how this stuff affects real people, not just political games. Let's check out what she had to say.
It is interesting that we're having this hearing, and I know one thing that I have learned so far is that while freshman orientation just ended, we need a course on what the census is for, because we have people sitting in Congress and have no idea what the census is for. And so I do appreciate that you have talked about what the funding is for, but it seems like my colleagues really want to zero in on southern states. So let's talk about Texas for a second, and let's deal with them and their concerns about their districts, and let's also talk about the citizen situation. So I don't know how much you've paid attention to the election, but we do have an incoming administration, and we have a border czar who has said that they are going to deport everyone that is here and is not a citizen. They are planning to do mass deportations. In fact, in the state of Texas, our commissioner has offered up land so that they can put these camps there and send people out of our country. Now, if you start asking people, are you a citizen or not, and they're living in a home, and somebody's threatening to go in and raid homes and take everybody out and send them back to wherever they came from, I mean, I would imagine that may make people say, never mind, I'm not going to fill this out. But I mean, has that been your finding or no?
We have conducted research that shows that there can be selective inclusion of individuals who reside in a residence because of
Exactly, because you've got the federal government that is asking this question, and it's the same federal government that is threatening to go and yank people out of their schools, their homes, and things like that. And then we just had a conversation where we were talking about how many voters. Listen, when you're counting people, you're not just counting voters. You count children, don't you?
Correct.
You count a lot of people that aren't necessarily voters, and I want to make sure that we really get to the nitty gritty on Texas, because this is hilarious to me. Texas added 2 seats in 2020, according to the census, and we know that there was a significant undercount, specifically in Texas for a combination of reasons, but we know that specifically Texas added 4 million people. Of those 4 million people, do you want to take a guess at how many were Anglos? Just a guess.
I'd say a majority.
180,000 That's it, of 4 million. 95% of the people that were added, and we know that when it comes to minority populations, they tend to be undercounted. So get this, we added 4 million people. They were people of color. Texas got 2 new seats. So they took those black and brown and Asian bodies, and guess what? Do you think that we got a new black, brown, or Asian seat? Somehow, the way that they do their Republican math in the state of Texas, that amounted to 2 new white seats. Guess what? White Republican seats. We got 2 new Republican seats out of 4 million people of color. So let me tell you, they love to use our bodies to apportion us in an inaccurate way. All right? So when we talk about our districts, I also want to talk about something that Texas is taking advantage of that I've worked on a lot. In fact, I did legislation on. It is called prison gerrymandering. I don't know if you are familiar with it.
I'm familiar.
But here is the reality. The numbers show that in rural Texas, they were constantly bleeding population. Urban Texas was growing exponentially. But what they do is they count inmates where they are imprisoned instead of counting them where it is that they will return to. So their family members that are in Dallas, Texas, or Houston, or wherever, their family members, when they need something, they call us, even if it's relating to that inmate. But somehow rural Texas is getting better roads than they probably deserve because they're counting those inmates that are not driving on those roads. They're counting those inmates that are not using their hospitals. They're counting those inmates whose children are not attending their schools because of prison gerrymandering. So again, Republicans are really good about using black and brown bodies because I can also tell you that the numbers are clear that we have a black and brown incarceration issue, not just in Texas, but in this country. And in fact, the state of Texas incarcerates more people than any other independent democratic country. That is how bad our incarceration is just in the state of Texas. And I've got so many great colleagues on this committee that actually benefit from being able to do things like that. So listen, this is about resources. It's about putting the resources where the people are. And I am curious to know, for whoever goes next, do you ask your constituents when they call your office, are you a citizen or not? Because at the end of the day, I have to handle immigration cases as well in my office. We are elected to represent the people regardless of their citizenship, and we have to help them because they reside in our districts. Thank you, and I'll yield.
All right, y'all, that's the end of today's video. This hearing really showed the difference between the folks who are up there doing the work for the people and the ones just playing political games. The census might not be the most exciting topic, but it's a big deal. It affects money for schools, hospitals, roads, even how much power our communities get. And let's be honest, too often we're the ones getting left out. I respect people like Representative Maxwell Frost and Representative Jasmine Crockett for standing up and breaking it down in a way that makes sense. They're out here telling the truth and keeping the focus where it should be. If you like this breakdown, go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment, and share it with somebody. Appreciate y'all for watching. Stay informed, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.